Hey folks, welcome to Bear Mountain. This week we're working on a project that we kind of do every year about this time in, well, we're a little late actually, maybe by a week or so in January. We kind of go through and just give our hellebores. We have a bed of these guys that are kind of left to their own devices most of the year. So we're kind of raising these not so much for, the official beautiful cut flower garden, where it's totally pristine, but it's a pretty wild place. And what we do is we let the refuse from the leaves from the trees and whatever else that we cut down in here to kind of act as a mulch for the plants that will begin to bloom. Actually, some of them are showing early buds now. These hellebores is called a Lenten Rose. I don't know if folks know what that is, but the Lent period of time runs from basically Ash Wednesday in February, mid-February, till Easter. And that's kind of the bloom time for these guys in this climate here. Where we're at is an 8B in Western Oregon. Some people have some varieties that bloom a little earlier, and certainly if you were kind of babying them along a bit, in terms of they're a little more, maybe a little warmer in terms of where they're at. On our property, we're on the northeast side of a hill, so this time of year is pretty long in the shade and kind of slow to warm up and pretty quick to cool down. So ours tend to bloom, depending on the variety, anywhere from now till pretty much right around near the end of March. That's kind of been our typical bloom time. Now the hellebores is more, its natural habitat is an edge plant. In terms of, if you look at what I mean by an edge plant, it's a plant that grows on that interface between where a wooded area is and where grass starts to take off. It's kind of a small, basically, wouldn't really call it a shrub, but it's just a small plant that grows well in dappled shade. Doesn't necessarily want great full sunshine, particularly during the hot parts of the summer. So it's pretty well suited for our climate here in the Pacific Northwest. And what a lot of people do is they're very pristine about it. They go through and they cut off all the leaves and they make sure there's no trash or anything left on the beds, which gets you, no slugs and gets you a pretty pristine bloom. And what I tend to do though is since we're not in the cut flower business anymore, I'm letting our bed just kind of adapt to being on the edge of what you would call our wooded area. If you look at it, you can kind of see as I go up the hill, this is a maple, oak, birch area, and we're getting quite a bit of leaf duff in here. And this is actually, if you look at, you can kind of see some green up there. That those are cyclamens that are naturally, they're basically creating their own little patch. It started from a very small patch that was planted just as an experiment a number of years ago, and they've kind of been moving in on their own. And that's kind of what I'm doing with these guys too, is once I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut out anything like, some blackberries that kind of tried to start to get established in here. And then I'm going to cut down old leaves and I'm just going to lay them down as a mulch around it. And then anywhere areas like over here where I still have grass and it's still fairly open, and my birch trees over here are pretty young, I'm going to be just kind of mulching that with a cut grass layer. I got a big old pile of that material sitting right there that I'm going to use as a mulch to kind of put about 4 inches down and just kind of knock the grass down. And eventually, as these trees get more height to them and get more leaves, we'll get more leaf cover, and that'll be pushing it further and further down into the hellebores bed here. So our cleanup really isn't going to take us that long. It's probably, a good afternoon, and then probably tomorrow I'll just mulch them up. But a lot of people, like I said, they'll take more time, and they'll scrape it down to no leaf duff, nothing around it. And slugs can be an issue with hellebores. I'm not too worried about it because I guess I'll share a few with the slugs, but I'll get plenty of my own, because we're talking about a bed here that its total length is probably about 75 feet of hellebores. And they're actually naturalizing pretty well on their own. I mean, it looks wintertime, they look horrid right now, you know, because they've kind of been smacked around a bit by the weather. But you know, once they start to bloom, they really look pretty cool. And these plants, they're kind of naturalizing on their own too, because I leave a lot of blooms and let them go to seed, and the seeds will begin to naturalize in here on their own too. So I've got a bunch of different varieties. A lot of them are the Winter Jewels series, and then there's a few that we've just picked up from other places as we've gone over through the years. And so it kind of got a broad variety of colors. A lot of them are doubles. We do have some singles in here, and it makes you know, when they do get to blooming and you can get a nice, you know, good picking out of them. The nice thing about a hellebores is when you pick them at the right time, when the blooms are a bit papery and the pollen stems are pretty close to being easily knocked off, they really do make a very nice cut flower and an arrangement, and have a really long vase life too. So I'm going to get started here and just kind of show you in general what I'm doing, and then we'll get the job, you know, kind of done and start with the mulching. So here's an example of new hellebores buds coming up. You can kind of see them. I'll get my stake out of the way here, but here's a flower bud. And you can notice how the older leaves are all like laying kind of splayed out. So what I've been doing is coming through and just whacking these guys off, and then leave them there as a mulch. Here's an area as an example that I've been doing. I kind of gone through, you can kind of see it's a mixture of leaves from the oak tree and leaves from the hellebores. And there's one plant that's kind of ahead of schedule on it, getting its bloom stalks up. We're supposed to get some snow and so a lot of rain over the next few weeks. It's been a pretty dry January, and we really haven't had much rain in the last couple of 3 weeks. But with the snow, it'll push all the stuff that I cut down and make it more of a mulch. And yes, there will be slugs, but slugs are part of the natural decay process. And again, what I'm not going for is max production. If I was going for max production, I would sanitize this bed. I would take all of the material off of it that is, you know, leaf mold or leaf that's going to be rotting down. I would use well-rotted compost, and to actually, I would have done this probably closer to right around New Year's, before any blossom stalks got up. And I probably would have used a lawnmower over it to cut it down to about 2 inches in height, roughly. And that would have took any of the leaves and would have shredded them up, or, you know, so that they wouldn't be an issue. Because if you're trying to go for cut flower production and volume production and pristine flowers, this would not be the way to do it. But I'm looking at it from this standpoint on a long-term basis, that every year when I was doing it that older way, because we don't use herbicides, I would have to come in and weed the bed, particularly after spring bloom. And with this method, what I've been noticing over the last couple of years of doing this is that yes, I'm getting fewer blooms that are, you know, super high quality, but I'm getting enough for personal use. And I'm also changing the dynamic. The number of weeds that are beginning to grow in the bed are getting less and less. And actually in the spring, with the material that I'm leaving out, it looks like a really messy mulch, is fairly rotted down, and the seeds from the season's blooms can actually get a chance to start new plants. So this bed is actually in the process of kind of rejuvenating itself. And I know that when people look at stuff like this and they just go, oh my gosh, it's just, oh, it's going to be a total fail. Maybe in other climates it would be more difficult to do this, because this plant is really well suited for the wet side of the Pacific Northwest. Um, it seems to make it through pretty good. I don't really have the disease problems where they're saying, oh, it's the disease, the black rot and the you know, funguses are just taking the plants out. And what's interestingly enough is it's not. It's like something is going on in here that is keeping things balanced in a way that, yes, it's not pristine, but it's also, it's actually thriving. Now, here's the weird little thing. Last summer, I only irrigated this bed twice, once in June and again in August. And it basically had enough moisture and from, you know, just what was in the soil and the way the plants are, they did just fine without any extra water. Now, we in this side of the Pacific Northwest, our dry period, we get very little rain from about the middle of June till early September. So we get almost a 3-month period of time where we can go with almost no rainfall at all, or at least nothing of, you know, significant measurement. And there'll be very long stretches of 2, 3, 4 weeks where there's no moisture at all. And these guys did just fine. When I was doing it the older way, you know, with cleaning out, sanitizing it, putting the compost down, I'd have to come back through and I'd have to water these guys at least on a weekly basis. And so this just, it's just an interesting side note is that as this thing is getting to be more and more nature taking care of itself, I'm having to do less and less. So you folks might be asking, you know, what kind of tool do I use to do this? And I actually use a hand sickle. It's something I got from the Scythe Supply Company out of Maine. Actually, you can probably get these things anywhere. It's a pretty common hand sickle. It's a typical one that's been around American gardens for years, and it makes pretty fast work of it. You just kind of root around, chop things up, give it a few whacks, and leave it down on the ground. This is it. You can kind of see the inside blade. You just sharpen it. You can use a whetstone or a mill file to do it. I kind of, if I got some, you know, serious dinks in it, you know, from hitting a rock or something like that, I'll probably use a file just to kind of get it out. And then I kind of hone it with a pretty coarse whetstone, and it does the job pretty good. It's got a nice handle on it, and if I can get it in the picture. And it's a pretty cheap tool, but it actually does the job really well. So that's all there is to what I do for taking care of my hellebores. Now, like I said, a lot of other people would probably just, you know, screaming into the screen right now, you can't do that. You can't leave stuff laying around those plants. You're going to kill them off. But honestly, it seems like, for me anyway, it hasn't bothered them at all. And I guess I kind of look at it this way too, is that the more things I can kind of let grow to their nature, and I'm not looking anymore for 100% perfection, because nature is by itself is always got a whole lot of different cycles running at the same time. So getting a perfect bed of perfect is, you know, well, you got to do a lot of work to get there. And I guess where I'm at, and, you know, the stuff I want to do on the farm and time, and, you know, as we all get a little older and back starts to ache a little more, to me, this is kind of an easy afternoon job. And then it's just good to go. And I really don't have to do anything more to it, except maybe run the irrigation, you know, once or twice in the summertime, and then cut my hellebores when they're ready to bloom, or when they are blooming. And that's about it. So, like I said, what I've been seeing is I'm getting less and less weeds. I used to always be fighting blackberries getting started in there, and thistle and everything else, and all that stuff is gone. So obviously the nature of the soil is changing, and these plants are thriving really pretty good right on the edge of kind of a little fake forest that I created by planting trees here about 30 years ago. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and you know, we'll get more activities going when the weather gets better, and we can, well, the weather is actually pretty good, but things need to be growing before I can do a lot more different things in the tunnels and stuff like that. And we'll be doing some more planting coming up this next week. We're going to start some different veg. We already started our shelling peas, and we're going to be starting snow peas, sweet peas for flowers, and probably going to be in the next week or two starting to begin to sprout some of my sweet potatoes for this next season coming up. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.